I'm with Rev Dr Karen Kemp. Karen, I understand you're a senior coach and lecturer at Laidlaw College.
Yes, I am.
Great. Tell me, what is coaching?
It's a really good question, because actually there are as many different ways of coaching as there are coaches. So the question for me is really, what is coaching in the Centre for Church Leadership at Laidlaw?
Mm-hmm.
And coaching is basically a sustained, purposeful, ongoing conversation between two people, one of them a trained coach, and the conversation is a forward-leaning conversation. So we're always looking ahead, and it's a very proactive kind of a conversation.
Okay, so if I was an average parish vicar, what would I gain by being in a coaching relationship?
Well, you would gain, I don't know if you're familiar with Bloom's stage model of the sorts of relationships that leaders need to be able to lead well. But Bloom talks about needing good on-stage relationships, people that we know have our back when we're actually doing our ministry task or roles. And then he talks about needing off-stage or backstage relationships. So backstage relationships are the support crew, and the support crew are all about making sure that you're the best that you can be on stage. And then you've got your offstage people who are more like confidants or family or friends who are just going to love you to bits regardless. So a coach sits in the backstage crew, support crew of a leader's life. And so the coaching ideally supports the vicar or the priest or the leader in their church context to bring their best selves with self-awareness, a deep awareness of what God is doing in and through them, with a clear conviction about who they are, who they're called to be, but also what it is that God's calling them to be part of in terms of the bigger picture. And then thirdly, with greater competence, ideally. So a coach supports the leader to become ever more competent in the skills required to do their particular role in ministry. So greater awareness of themselves, God and others, greater conviction about God's great kingdom plan and where they fit in it and where their ministry unit fits in that, and thirdly, greater competence. So we focus on all three of those dimensions.
Sounds absolutely amazing and really, really helpful and useful. What are the differences between, say, coaching and spiritual direction or supervision, or even something like mentoring? Can you explain?
Good question. So we'll come to coaching at the end, I think. Supervision is largely, it's focused on very similar dimensions as coaching is. So supervision will focus on attending to ethical dimensions, attending to formative or development dimensions of the person and their task. It'll focus on restoring the person when things have gone really badly in their ministry and they need a bit of support and encouragement. A supervisor also stands in that place. Coaching is very similar. You would expect to be attending to ethical questions around the practice of the person you're coaching. You would expect to be quite proactively forming and developing their leadership skills. You would also expect to hold a God-centered space in which brokenness and healing can be attended to. But probably the fourth dimension, which coaching is particularly geared toward, is what we call the transformative dimension. And supervisors may or may not bring that dimension in, but it's front and center with a coaching scenario. So coaching, the difference between coaching and supervision is less about what you do in session and probably more about how forward-leaning the session actually is.
I see.
So supervision is often about looking back on what's happened and trying to make sense of it in a way that supports the person going forward. Coaching is much more strongly forward-leaning.
Okay,
so it's
I'm getting
much
that.
more
Yeah.
action-oriented. It's got momentum. When you finish a session one time and the coachee agrees on the next steps, first session back is, so how did that go? And what did we learn from it? And where are we going this time?
Sounds absolutely brilliant. So there's a lot of accountability in the coaching relationship.
High accountability and high energy.
Mm-hmm.
So going back to the question, that's how it differs primarily from supervision as we know it. Secondly, it differs from mentoring in that in coaching, the coach doesn't necessarily have to be an expert in the field of the person that they're supervising, or coaching. And that's because the coach's secret weapon, if you like, is the art of a good question that helps the person actually discern for themselves what's actually happening in their context and where they're going with it. And there's plenty of studies out there that show that if a person's done that work for themselves and come up with the next step for themselves, they're much more likely to follow it through.
I see.
So the difference between coaching and mentoring is that mentoring is about teaming a leader up with somebody who has very particular experience that the leader wants to grow into. So the leaders that we coach in the Centre for Church Leadership, we coach them over a long period of time, but every so often there'll be a sense from the person being coached that they want to grow in their capacity to lead worship better or to run their vestry meetings a bit more sharply. And the coach may not be an expert in that, but they know somebody who's really good at it. And so they'll refer the person on for a fixed period of time. It might be just a couple of meetings to learn from the mentor, because the mentor has more experience in that specific space. And then spiritual direction, lastly. Again, it's a question of focus rather than what we're actually doing. So the primary focus of coaching isn't to deal deeply with a person's relationship with God for themselves, but it will touch on that, obviously, in the process of processing what's been brought to the table in the session.
Right.
And we would expect to pray with our coachees and obviously be helping them to discern what God might be saying in and through them. But that's not the primary focus. The primary focus is actually, okay, where are we going in this ministry and how are we going to get there?
Okay, to close off, 2 quick questions. What are those 3 principles of coaching you mentioned?
So it's about asking good questions that help the person being coached to deepen in their awareness of themselves, of God, of others, and of their context. It's about asking questions that help the person deepen their conviction around who they're called to be and where they fit in God's big story. And then thirdly, to support the leader to grow in competence in their capacity to do all that they're called to do, and
Brilliant.
to do that well.
And final question, if some of my viewers wanted to follow this up and find out about coaching a little bit more, where would they go?
Go to our website, the Centre for Church Leadership at Laidlaw College, and there's a video there with some of our leaders who've been coached, just reflecting on how they've found that. There's an Anglican in there, so and also there's a bunch of material there, basically unpacking a little bit more specifically what it is and how we go about it.
That's so helpful. Thank you so much for your time, Karen. God bless.
Good.